I've lived in East Palestine for 65 years now. That's my home.
That palpable anger is justifiable. And it followed a bizarre moment yesterday when former President Donald Trump visited East Palestine along with the man whose election he supported, Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance. Trump boasted about the help he was bringing to the community, and it was about as weird as you might expect.
We're bringing thousands of bottles of water, Trump water, actually, most of it. Some of it we had to go to a much lesser quality water. You want to get those Trump bottles, I think, more than anybody else.
Trump followed that bit of theater with a pit stop turned campaign photo op at a local McDonald's, of course, where he handed out MAGA hats, bragged about his in-depth knowledge of the menu, and denied that his administration had anything to do with regulatory changes that contributed to the disaster. And many residents in a county that voted overwhelmingly for Trump in the last two elections were elated. But it was him. It was Donald Trump and his administration who gave the rail industry and Norfolk Southern exactly what they wanted: fewer and looser rules around rail safety. Trump conveniently forgot to tell his most loyal supporters how Norfolk Southern lobbied heavily for laxer safety rules and how receptive the regulators in the Trump administration were to their arguments on rolling back the rules. There's also the litany of Obama-era regulations to advance safety that Trump's administration rescinded and that the Biden administration has or is trying to reinstate. Look, Donald Trump has clearly made a cynical calculation that the grift of giving residents of a poisoned town decade-old Trump water and signing some hats will be enough for people who have endured 3 weeks of fear and illness, an inability to drink the water coming out of their own taps or take a shower without worrying that it'll make them sick, that will be enough to make them vote for him again and to ignore his role in their suffering. And you know what? Maybe that cynical hope will be borne out by reality. Maybe people in East Palestine, Ohio, would vote for him again. I mean, our politics are certainly that polarized, right? Still today, Secretary Buttigieg was asked what the former president could do to actually help.
One thing he could do is express support for reversing the deregulation that happened on his watch. I heard him say he had nothing to do with it, even though it was in his administration. So if he had nothing to do with it and they did it in his administration against his will, maybe he could come out and say that he supports us moving in a different direction.
Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg joins me now. And, you know, the sort of theatrics of Donald Trump being in Palestine were odd, but this is a community that voted overwhelmingly for him. The county that Palestine is in voted 71-29 for Donald Trump. And I just want you to sort of reflect on the irony. In 2016, it was 68-26. This is a Trump county. What do you make of the fact that he went there, despite the fact that the regulations that he rolled back were partly responsible for this tragedy?
I mean, it was definitely an ironic thing to do. You take down regulations, you water down regulations, you weaken the power of the administration to deal with freight railroad companies, and then you show up wanting to be a great friend of the people who have been impacted by a rail disaster. This is somebody who, as far as I know, never went to a derailment site when one of those happened on his watch, and there were thousands, even ones with fatalities, never even sent his transportation secretary to go. Now that it's campaign season, I guess things are different. We were there to work. We were there to get things done. And I'm really glad I had the opportunity to be there, because I got to tell you, the people I spent time with in East Palestine, we didn't talk politics. I'm sure most of them are on the other side politically, but that didn't come up. What came up was how concerned they are for their community. I spent time with the mayor, spent time with folks in local government who are trying to do everything from make sure people have access to good information about health to making sure people have access to good information about water, keeping that waterworks and wastewater operation going. And, you could sense a level of frustration with the political circus that has descended on their town after they've already been through so much fear, so much disruption, and none of it their fault. None of it because of anything that they did wrong, other than just the consequence of living where they live. And they deserve to be safe, and they deserve to know they're going to be taken care of. By the way, part of what is going to make sure they're taken care of is the work of the EPA. The EPA administrator has been there twice. The EPA is the agency that's been able to make sure that Norfolk Southern is paying for the remediation. The EPA came under a lot of attack, as you know, under the last administration, but it's another agency alongside our Department of Transportation and all of the other agencies that are on the ground. I met dozens of folks on the federal side, so many folks from the state, so many local officials doing everything in their power to help this community. And you know what I saw was public servants from all levels of government, including levels of government that have been vilified, doing everything they can to make these residents better off, and residents who deserve to make sure, even when the circus goes, that that they're going to be taken care of.
Let me ask you, because you mentioned political silly season, and it is. I mean, it's a campaign season. One of the people who've taken a lot of the blame and taken a lot of the brick bets is you. Senator Marco Rubio has said you should resign. There's been a lot of criticism over the time it took to arrive, for you to personally go, for the president to go, and they're even using the president's trip to Ukraine as a wedge. What do you have to say to Senator Rubio, who is blaming you and saying you should resign as a result of what happened in East Palestine?
Well, the strange thing about hearing that from Senator Rubio was that the last time I had gotten a communication from him about railroad regulation was when he had signed a letter asking us to weaken our inspection practices. So, but let me say this. I mean, if anybody, regardless of what they've done in the past, is serious about the future, Republican, Democrat, Independent, if anybody has found religion on the subject of making sure that we actually regulate these corporations and hold them accountable, then I am calling them in and inviting them to the table. Yep. We did a lot of work from day one, doing things like restoring and enhancing safety audits, which were pulled back under the last administration, resuming work on a rule that will require you to have at least 2 people, which is common sense, on these long trains, at least 2. That's a rule that was frozen under the last administration. We resumed, but we could do so much more, especially if Congress were there to help. And I'll give you one example of something I would love for Senator Rubio and any other member of Congress who cares about this issue to sign on to, which is to raise the legal cap on the fines that my department is allowed to assess when there is a violation. Right now, even if there's a hazardous material violation that results in somebody getting killed, the most that we can assess against a company is about $250,000, which you can imagine for a multi-billion-dollar corporation like Norfolk Southern or the other freight railroads. That's a drop in the bucket to them. That's an easy, natural, common sense thing that Congress could do tomorrow is raise that cap and give us more tools to work with to hold these railroads accountable.
And I will note that the governor, Mike DeWine, did say that President Biden called him immediately and that he initially did not think that they needed any additional assistance, which is was what he literally said. I don't have time to play that soundbite because I want to play another one for you, because there's a thing where this is happening in a very red community, but this is not uncommon. Like, these kinds of man-made disasters have happened. We saw it in Flint. We've seen it in Jackson. We've seen them all. And normally the thing that these communities have in common is that they're not rich, that they're communities that are not wealthy. And so the train lines go through their communities. Let me just play you what Tucker Carlson had to say, because the reason Trump went there is he has this "you're forgotten" meme that he wants to keep going with. Here's Tucker Carlson adding to that and throwing in the aspect of race.
East Palestine is overwhelmingly white, and it's politically conservative. More than 70% of the voters in the surrounding county supported Donald Trump in the last election. That shouldn't be relevant, but as you're about to hear, it very much is. Imagine if this had happened in, well, the favored cities of Philadelphia and Detroit. If this affected the rich or the favored poor, it would be the lead of every news channel in the world. But it happened to the poor, benighted town of East Palestine, Ohio, whose people are forgotten and, in the view of the people who lead this country, forgettable.
By the way, I will note that it's been the lead on this show multiple times, including tonight, which is why you're here in our A block. And Detroit is like right near Flint. But anyway, I'm going to allow you to respond, because this is a meme that keeps people in places like Palestine voting for people like Donald Trump, who then deregulate the train lines that poison them. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where Tucker Carlson was when they were trying to dismantle the EPA, which is now maybe the main thing standing between the people of East Palestine and ecological disaster. Look, they're always ready to take it back to race. But the reality is that we're going to serve everybody. That's how this administration works. We're not out there to bring resentment. We're out there to bring results. And what our focus was today, and our focus, by the way, from the first hours when we had our Department of Transportation personnel on the ground, from those very first hours in this response all the way through today and well into the future, for as long as it takes. The focus is to make sure that people get the information they need, the support that they need, and the accountability that is needed for corporations like Norfolk Southern to clean up this mess. There is a long pattern of voices like that in the ideological media, let's call it that, trying to pit people against each other, only to turn around and support policies that are especially hard on working class and low income people of every race. Because one thing, you know how a broken clock is right at least twice a day. One thing he's exactly right about is that environmental disasters tend to happen more frequently and more painfully to lower income communities. We call that environmental justice, and yet if I use those words, I'm sure he'll be the first one to say that we're too woke to be paying attention to the bread and butter of our jobs. Part of the bread and butter of our job is to keep people safe from being harmed or killed, which is what regulation, sometimes an unpopular word, is all about. It's what enforcement is all about. It's what accountability is all about. We restored some of that regulation and enforcement and accountability that was stripped away when we got here. I know that's going on the EPA side. That's definitely going on with us on the Department of Transportation side. And we will continue that as long as we have this honor of serving, because what we came here to do is to protect every American, and I mean every American, who comes into contact with our transportation system.